peaceful morning to one and all. Now we have an interaction with the great writer Geetha Hariharan. I request Ms. Hannah Mary George to welcome the gathering.
Respected dignitaries on and off the dais, teachers, and my dear friends, a very warm good morning to one and all. I consider this as a great privilege to welcome you all to this function. Today, we are lucky to have the presence of a known, eminent personality, Mrs. Geetha Hariharan. Mrs. Geetha Hariharan is an Indian author and an editor based in New Delhi. She was born in Coimbatore and grew up in Bombay and Manila. She completed her matriculation in MA Communication from Fairfield University. Mrs. Hariharan first worked in public broadcasting in New York and then with a publishing firm as an editor in India. She currently works as a freelance editor. Geetha Hariharan requires a little introduction to the readers of contemporary Indian fiction. Her novels include The Thousand Faces of Night, winner of Commonwealth Book Prize, The Ghost of Vasu Master, When Dreams Travel, and In Times of Siege. She has also written an acclaimed book of short stories, The Art of Dying, co-edited a book of children's fiction, Sorry, Best Friend. Her most recent work is a collection of short stories for young readers entitled The Winning Team. Her novels have been translated to a number of European and South Asian languages. She writes a regular column for the major Indian newspaper, The Telegraph. She has once quoted that the powerless must have a dream or two, dreams that break walls, dreams that go through walls as if they are powerless. Her novel, The Thousand Faces of Night, which won the Commonwealth Book Prize, was commended by critics as a debate novel which interviews the fabled myths and the legends of India with a young woman's search for the self, exploring the universal themes of freedom, independence, and desire. Together with Anita Desai, Shashi Deshpande, Meena Alexander, Geetha Hariharan has been hailed as one of the women writers producing a body of Indian literature that is committed to feminist and social issues. We are immensely happy and privileged to have you with us at Dayapuram Arts and Science College for Women. I welcome you, ma'am. I also would like to welcome Mr. M.P. Ashley, dramaturg, critic, theatre scholar, and the associate professor at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, who will be moderating this session. I welcome Ms. Regina, Principal of Dayapuram Arts and Science College for Women, Vice Principal Dr. Seenat Ibrahim, Adil Sir, and Abraham Sir. Last, but certainly never the least, I would like to welcome all my dear friends to this function. Thank you.
Coming back to the Dayapuram Arts and Science College, I must begin where I, in some sense, began my teaching. I started teaching in this college, very small college, with less than 30 members as an English teacher. And it gives me immense pleasure to come back, when I come back to moderate a session with the illustrious writer, Geetha Hariharan. And it's a personal privilege because as a postgraduate student in the University of Hyderabad, Geetha's Thousand Faces of the Night was the first Indian English women's novel that I ever read. And that, in English, and in my discipline, that's what introduced me to a series of intricate manifestations of the night, to a writer who talks about society, history, culture, through human tales that have never been told. And I understand that the Dayapuram Arts and Science College is observing this year, and the Dayapuram Education and Culture Center is observing 2013 as the year of gender sensitization. And like I said, one can't just talk about teaching when one talks about the Dayapuram, because nowhere else has taught me about society, about human beings, about compassion, about justice than the Dayapuram has to me. The Dayapuram and City Ibrahim Sir, City Sir, takes us all back to some of the fundamentals of human interaction and social formations. So it's very important that when the center is observing a year of gender sensitization, we have with us today somebody like Geetha Hariharan, who has been most powerfully, most evocatively talking about gender justice and so on. And I understand she's going to talk about making women's dream travel, reading and writing women. A French feminist, Hélène Cixous, once wrote about women's writing. Write yourself, your body must be heard. And I'm curious, puzzled, and quite interested in the title, because she's going to talk about, I think she's going to talk about dream and travels. Dreams are transformative, are transgressive, they're also escapist, just like travel is. At a time when women's movements, women's very ability to travel, move around, is confined by a series of frames. They might be familial, they might be societal, they might be market-based, they might be religious, they might be communal. There are a series of restrictions imposed on people, and then you have an activist writer talking about dreams, travel, and writing. Three of them are, like I said, are ways of transforming transgression or moving away. And I hope to listen to this on, like all of you are eager to listen to this on by Geetha Hariharan. And also, this is all the more important that it's a time at which women and dreaming and movements have become a political category. So with that, I'll go on to the function, because you're eager to listen to her. And the design of the event roughly is going to be, she'll be presenting, she has a paper prepared, I'm given to understand. So she'll be presenting her paper, and after which there'll be time for discussions, interactions, and so on. So without any delay, I would like to invite Geetha Hariharan to give her thoughts on all these categories and to enlighten us in a very illustrious manner, in a very powerful manner, about the issues, the world that we live in. Geetha Hariharan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for asking me to come here. In a writer's life, these are the highlights. When you suddenly emerge from that room in which you're looking at the blank sheet of paper or the blank screen day after day, and then you actually meet the people who matter. These are the people who either read you or should read you, and the people who you learn from about what are the questions you should be asking in your written work. I actually do have a paper, but I'm not interested in the paper. I'm interested in talking to you. And I want to begin by saying that how do we talk about gender justice? Where do we start talking? Now, this is not a classroom. We are friends talking to each other. So rather than starting with ideas, which are important of course, but rather than starting with ideas or a chat about what we want, what women want, what good men want, what citizens of this country want, suppose we start with people, because finally that is what matters. So what I want to do is look at some real lives, some lived lives of women, history, not as it is maybe in the classroom, but that is what history really is. It's about people, both past and present, history in the making. So I'm going to talk about some women who I'm going to describe this morning as our grandmothers. There are many young people here, so they might be your great-great-grandmothers. But let's, for the purpose of, let's agree that they are our grandmothers. Every time, March 8th, International Women's Day rolls around, I think we need to pay tribute to these grandmothers who have taken, some of them took big risks, some of them took very small risks that nobody knew about, perhaps except themselves, to earn better lives not only for themselves, but for us, their granddaughters. Some of these women are public figures, but there are less public icons, less public women we need to salute. And for many of us, this means remembering and rewriting our grandmothers' lives. What were these grandmothers like? They wanted to read, they wanted to write, they wanted to travel physically and through ideas. They wanted to take part in the world around them. So, let's meet some of these grandmothers for this morning. The first grandmother is a grandmother called Subbalakshmi. This is not one of the more well-known Subbalakshmis. This Subbalakshmi was the grandmother of the author and women's leader Maithili Shivaraman from Chennai. Now, Maithili wrote a book about her grandmother, and she describes the courage as well as the inevitable defeat of this Brahmin woman in colonial India. Let me tell you something about Subbalakshmi. Subbalakshmi grew up in a traditional Brahmin household at the time the British were in India. She wouldn't have learned how to read English, but luckily for her, her father asked her to read the Hindu, the newspaper, to her every morning. So, she too, like her brothers, though she wasn't sent to school, she learned how to read English. Now, the important thing there is not the English language, but what it gave her, what the door it opened to her. Reading the paper to her father, she started taking an interest in something called politics. She said, oh, this is our country. There is a fight going on with the British who are here. These are the kind of fights we are having among ourselves in this bigger fight. And that is what is politics. So she started, though she never went to a classroom in her life, she learnt English, she developed an interest in political life. But even if she wanted to go to school, they couldn't send her because caste purity had to be maintained. And she got married at the age of 11. At 14, she had a daughter. The marriage was not a very happy one. But she managed to read. She would send other people, her brother, whoever she could get hold of, she would send them to the public library and read books. And it wasn't just reading. She also wanted beauty in her life other than what was available at home. She was interested in nature. She was interested in art. She made friends with people who had bigger lives. She became a friend of Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay. She went and looked at art galleries. She talked to people. Once she was in the hospital after she had a baby. She became very good friends with a Christian woman called Grace, who introduced her not only to another way of life, but things like bird watching. And then when it was the turn of her daughter to be educated, she fought for her daughter to go to school. Throughout, we see her bravery in what could have been an empty life. She read, she made friends, she appreciated nature around her, she fought for her daughter's education. She even you must imagine this little woman wearing a muddy sare going out to the streets of Chennai, and she waved a black flag when the Prince of Wales came to Madras. So, and in her diary, her granddaughter found a little entry saying, rupees 10 to the Congress Fund. So surely it is not just bravery, it is the strength of her dreams that she would live a bigger life than was allotted to her that made her this. And this in spite of the fact that she had epileptic fits and it was not diagnosed, as it often was not in those days. Then, these brave stories don't always have a happy ending. At the end of this life, what did she personally get? All she had was that towards the end of her life, it continued that she had to live at home and not live this kind of life she was working towards. And towards the end of her life, all she had were dreams, literal dreams. Every night she would dream that she was in South Africa, freeing the indentured women laborers there who had come from India. So everybody laughed at her. Her grandchildren said, oh, Patti, we don't want to listen to your dreams. Every night you dream you're in South Africa freeing women. So this was the tragic end of Subbalakshmi's life. Now the beauty of the grandmother link is that you are not stuck in one part of the world or in one caste or in one community. It can travel from one corner of the world to another. Subbalakshmi lived in a couple of rooms in a Madras house, but she read a lot about travel. And her yearning for travel was very similar to that of another grandmother who lived in Morocco. For those of you who are not sure, later go to the library and see where Morocco is. Now this grandmother was called Yasmina, and I hope the young Yasmin I have just met this morning is listening very carefully. Now Yasmina's granddaughter, who's called Fatima Mernisi, and is a wonderful writer and sociologist. Yasmina, unlike her granddaughter, what was her life like? She lived in a harem in Morocco. She was illiterate. She was not allowed to leave the harem. Yet, what did Yasmina do? She gave her granddaughter something very, very valuable. She told Fatima that to travel is the best way to learn and empower yourself. And why was this advice so useful? For Yasmina, illiterate and resident in a harem, traveling meant crossing boundaries, opening doors, crossing boundaries. And that is, crossing boundaries is the opposite of being in jail, being imprisoned. And in a life hemmed in by the walls of the harem, all she could depend on to survive was a little private philosophy which would help her go over that wall, at least in her imagination. So though Yasmina herself could not travel, she could tell her granddaughter, you travel, both for yourself and for me. And she said, travel is not just a privilege, it is one way to shed powerlessness. And she said, women had the right to travel and discover Allah's beautiful and complicated planet. She also said, there's a secret for you to use travel, to benefit from travel. You have to be in a state of readiness. You have to be ready for travel. And why do you have to be ready for travel? Because if travel is to be intelligent, not just taking a train or a bus from one place to another and seeing some waterfalls and a view, if travel is to be intelligent, You have to work at learning about strangers as well as yourself. And that is not easy. She also said, when a woman decides to use her wings, she takes big risks. What is she saying? All of us have wings. Under your uniform, there are those wings sprouting, ready to open. It's much harder for women in the societies we live in, all through history, to let those wings open. But know, when you are saying gender justice, empowerment, all these words, that when you open those wings, you have to take risks. You will have to take risks. And this is the story that Yasmina told her granddaughter. She said on her deathbed, she told her granddaughter, don't mourn for me. Keep alive my dream. Remember my own version of the Scheherazade story, the lady with the feather dress. Keep that alive. And the message of that story was that a woman should always be alert, ready to move, even if she is loved. She should be ready to be a nomad, a wanderer. And if she can't do it literally, then it has to be in her dreams and ambitions. That is the second grandmother. Now let's come back from Morocco without the need for air ticket and visa to West Bengal. Again, in the 19th century. A woman called